Garrett, let's move on to some of our other playoff contenders. We'll wrap those up, and then we'll kind of rapid fire through the rest of the conferences. Texas walloped Texas Tech on Friday night. 57-7 was the final score. Texas finally played a complete game and didn't let a team back in. I say that, and yet, there's still a lot of questions about Quinn Ewers' performance. Texas is good. Andrew posted in the chat, Texas is good, really good. I think that's absolutely right. I still think they could be in trouble when it comes down to the final situation here. Austin, I'm going to put his comment up here. Austin's asking, what does Texas need to do to make the top 4? They've got to obliterate Oklahoma State next week, I think.
100%.
And they're going to have all the eyeballs in the early slot, the Big 12 championship game. They have got to absolutely annihilate Oklahoma State. That's step 1. And I still think they need a little bit of help. They need Louisville to beat Florida State. And, they got to be cheering hard for Oregon. They've got to be cheering hard for maybe Alabama to upset Georgia. I don't know that Georgia would fall all the way to 4. Like, I don't know how that Alabama-Georgia game affects Texas because
look, I think they need Alabama to lose, honestly, because
I think they do too. I really do.
Gets the 4 seed if they lose.
I think they need Alabama to lose to Georgia. Andrew, is that line you're talking about the Texas game or the Louisville game? Because if Louisville's favored by 11.5, I'd be shocked.
I think it's probably the Texas game, just because I think they're a lot. I don't know that for sure. I mean, look, I don't think Florida State factors in right now because I do think there's a really good chance that they end up losing that title game. Just because, I mean, Louisville, they didn't look good today. They lost to Kentucky, but they're still a really good team. Florida State, not very convincing. But I think even taking Florida State out of the equation, I think right now it's looking like, if I'm guessing, I'm thinking Georgia wins. They're probably number 1. Michigan's probably going to end up being number 2. I think Michigan will probably hop Georgia for the moment, but if Georgia beats Bama, they'll go back to number 1. So they're probably 1 and 2 regardless. And then where we're at from there is you got 2 spots for winner of the Pac-12 championship game. I think that's a play and you're in. I'd like to say that Texas is in if they make if they win their conference. I think another 1-loss conference champion should get in. But you got to remember, like the playoff committee loves to find ways to, mess around with this and find, they'll find a way to put Ohio State at number 4. Like they're just going to find some way. They'd find a way to put Washington at number 4 if it avoids a rematch, but they think that Washington looked really good. Like, let's say that Oregon beats Washington, like 45-42 or something like that. And if both offenses were electric, they both looked really, really good. It's just a barely squeaked it out type of thing. I think there's a good chance that Washington, with their solo loss, could get in. And I'm not saying that they deserve that. I'm just saying it is on the it's something that I could see the committee doing. And so I think that if Texas wants the best chance to get in, they need it to go chalk for a little bit. Because if it goes chalk, then they're fine. Like Texas has to be the biggest Washington fans in the world right now because they need that undefeated conference champ there. And then everybody else needs to hold 2 losses. If they can do that, then it's just them in their conference championship versus, Ohio State and their 1 loss. And at that point, who knows what the committee is going to do? Half the time, I think they're just doing it for ratings. So who knows, but it's a tough decision to say. But Texas needs a little bit of help. If they do thrash Oklahoma State, they should be okay, but they need a little help.
Yeah, they've just got an undefeated team problem. We haven't had 4 undefeateds this late in the season.
Yep.
Texas is a deserving team. They, 11-1 in a power conference is always impressive. If they can get one more win and go 12-1, that's an impressive resume. That's a playoff worthy resume most years. They're just running into a problem this year. There's too many good teams at the top. And Austin asked again, does the common opponent matter? Oregon played Texas Tech. I don't think so. This is a much different Tech team with Tyler Shuck, I think, at quarterback than Baron Morton. And to me, that doesn't matter. I think it's too far removed with week 2 versus week 13.
I think that's the real problem is it's different points in the season. It should matter. Like that should be a comparison. my only issue is you say like a lot's happened since then. I think Texas's biggest issue is the fact that if you look at the last several weeks, they smoked Texas Tech, but they didn't really take care of business at Iowa State. I mean, they've won these games,
right?
But they didn't look that good against Iowa State, didn't look that good against TCU, didn't look that good against Kansas State. And even going back to Houston, that was a game they escaped. And I know the circumstances with, the quarterback injury and all that, like I get that, but that's still a game that happened. And so when you're looking at that from a resume standpoint, and then on the flip side, Oregon is smoking people back to back to back. And, Washington's undefeated and all the other teams that could factor into this, Ohio State even, being an issue. I think that's the only thing where that could get held against them come time for the playoff committee to decide. I don't think that should. I think you should get credit for winning your games the same way that Washington's getting credit for winning their games. But it is something I could see the committee doing. And so I'm trying to pump the brakes a little bit on expectations for Texas fans, because though I think it makes sense to put them in if they win their conference, I still think the resume maybe holds them back a little bit since they're playing some closer games into the season.
Yeah, and I think, the committee has communicated that that's how they view Texas, right? If Texas would be ranked ahead of Oregon by the committee if they thought that Texas was a better team than Oregon at this point in the season. And it's just really hard to leapfrog somebody this late in the season. It's going to be fascinating, and this is my last thing on Texas standing. It's going to be fascinating to see where Ohio State lands. And I think that's going to be your tell on if Texas has a real chance to get in or not. Because if Ohio State is still ranked ahead of Texas, I think Texas might be done. Like, I hate to say that.
I think you're probably right, unfortunately.
But, like, what is Ohio State? Unless you beat Oklahoma State by 50, then maybe the committee has a chance. But that's just the committee giving an excuse to let Ohio State backdoor their way in. Well, I don't want that. I don't want Ohio State to get the 4 seed. I'm just saying that you got to pay really close attention to where they put the Buckeyes on Tuesday night. And it's going to be fascinating.
If I'm ranking this, like if I'm making my own, and we'll talk about this on the preview, so tune back in for that. But if I'm ranking this, I'm probably putting Michigan 1, Georgia 2, just based off of what I've seen. And then I'm putting winner of the Pac-12 championship at 3, and Texas, if they win, Texas at 4. And I'm rocking with that because it should be just straight conference champs. The only caveat there is if Florida State finds a way to beat Louisville, then you have a real issue on your hands if you're Texas, because then you have to argue with I know that they don't have the quarterback, but they are 13-0 with the conference championship. Do you punish that? I mean, maybe, but I don't know that that's super fair. We talked about that. It's not fair to the other 21 starters all year if they punish Florida State for Jordan Travis not being your quarterback. So it's I don't know. It's going to be interesting. This is the most interesting we've seen the playoff get, I think, since probably that Baylor TCU situation back, 2014, 2015, whenever that was. I think this is as interesting as it's gotten. All that to say, and kind of wrapping this one up a little bit, doesn't this just prove we need the 12 teams? Like, we shouldn't be having this conversation. We should just be saying, oh, Texas 12-1 with the conference championship. Sure, they get to play for the playoff.
Right.
There shouldn't be any question about, well, but were they a little more deserving than Florida State without their quarterback? Or, well, what about Oregon and Washington? Like, we shouldn't be having that conversation. It should be a conversation about 10, 11, and 12. And, does Louisville drop out of contention now that they dropped to Kentucky? Because, they're kind of in it fringe, but, you lost the game, so here you are, That should be the conversation we're having, as opposed to, an obviously deserving Texas team not getting in.
Gracious,